Carr pawns in the game. Chapter 12. The Spanish Revolution. The long-range plan for the ultimate subjugation of Spain started, as in other countries, soon after the death of Christ. In an attempt to crush the power of the Christian Church in Spain, the money lenders their agents to infiltrate into the congregations and pose as Christians. 1. This placed them in positions to destroy the church organizations from within. This conspiracy became obvious, and in the 13th century Pope Innocent III instituted the Inquisition. The purpose of the Inquisition was to ferret out and question infidels suspected of masquerading as Christians. Spain had been exceptionally kind to the Jews. They were allowed to hold office and acted as tax collectors. But, as happened in every other country in Europe, the crimes of the atheistic money lenders, and their agents, were charged against the whole Jewish population. Between 1475 and 1504 during the reign of Isabella and Ferdinand, the Inquisition was used extensively to locate and destroy all traitors who plotted to overthrow the power of the church and state. The inquisitors under Torquemada discovered the subversive underground to be so widespread and well organized that in 1492 Spain followed the example of other European countries and expelled all the Jews. This task provided the opportunity for some extremists to organize mob violence against the Jews, and several extensive and regrettable massacres took place. These illegal killings were condemned publicly by the church authorities in Rome. After the international bankers reorganized during the 1600s, their agents infiltrated into the Spanish Treasury Department. They were exceptionally active during both the English and the French revolutions, trying to destroy the Spanish economy in order to prepare the way for revolutionary efforts in that country also. It is worthwhile to study the political intrigue that went on in Spain from 1839 to 1939 because it gives a clear picture of the pattern of the ultimate subjugation of all countries. There are 3 steps in all revolutionary efforts. First, infiltration by the agents of the Revolutionary Party into the government, civil services, armed forces, and labor organizations in order to be in position to destroy the government from within when the order to revolt is given. Second, the affiliation of the Revolutionary Party with the Socialist or Liberal Party left of center in order to overthrow the established government regardless of whether it is a monarchy or a republic. Third, subversive activities to bring about anarchy in order to discredit the Popular Front government and provide the excuse for forming a proletarian dictatorship. Once this is established, purges turn it into a totalitarian dictatorship as it happened in Russia in 1917. Karl Marx's agents organized Spain's first general political strike in 1865. In 1868 the directors of the World Revolutionary Movement WRM sent Señor Finelli to Spain to affiliate the anarchists with the Marxist revolutionaries. Finelli was a close friend of Bakunin, who was a close associate of Marx and Engels. In 1870 Bakunin fell out with Marx over policy. He was expelled from the First International of the WRM. 2. In 1872 Bakunin influenced the Spanish revolutionary leaders into forming the Socialist Democratic Alliance. 3. The Spanish government decreed Bakunin's extremist organizations illegal, but they continued to exist underground. The Grand Orient Lodges formed convenient headquarters. At a congress held in Zaragoza, the Spanish section of the Marxist International agreed to ally themselves with the Anarchist International. After its affiliation, both groups concentrated in organizing the various labor groups into a vast carnora. They crowned their combined efforts with a revolution which produced the First Spanish Republic in 1873. The effort on the part of the revolutionary leaders was accompanied with the usual reign of terror. Anarchy ran wild. All kinds of excesses took place. Finally, General Pavia brought off a coup d'état, and the revolutionaries went underground again. In order to emerge into the open once more, the members of the revolutionary underground supported the leaders of a mild, liberal movement to obtain political power. The revolutionary leaders used the quarrel going on between those who claimed the descendants of Don Carlos should occupy the throne, and those who claimed the descendants of Isabella should reign, to start a civil war. This war ended with the defeat of the Carlist group in 1876. 4. The Spanish workers really desired to organize for their own protection, but the majority did not agree with the extreme policy advocated by the anarchists. The anti-revolutionaries therefore organized the Workers' Association. These moderates were immediately set upon by both revolutionaries and employers of labor alike. 5. This persecution continued until 1888 when, at the suggestion of Pablo Iglesias, the moderate group adopted the name, the Workers' General Union, which became known in Spain as the UGT. The members of this organization did not get much support until after the government outlawed the Iberian Anarchist Federation. The syndicalist elements collaborated with the Radical Republican Party until 1908. They then formed the Solidaridad Obrera, and, 2 years later, in 1910, they rounded the Regional Federation of Labor known in Spain as the CRT. Immediately afterwards they formed the National Federation of Labor, CNT. In 1913 both the CRT and the CNT were suspended as the result of a series of strikes. The government did not object to the principles of collective bargaining, but it did object to the extremist policy, and revolutionary actions, of the leaders. So legitimate labor, striving for social justice, found their organizations barred because the radical element always seemed able to work its way into executive positions within the unions. The reaction was what the plotters of world revolution expected it would be. Their revolutionary syndicalist movement greatly increased in power and acted against all political parties, and against the state itself. The policy of these extremists was direct action, advocated with the greatest heat and violence. In 1916 the CRT was reorganized by Angel Pestana and Salvador Segui. In 1918 these two labor leaders were able to form in Barcelona the Sole Syndicate, generally known as the One Big Syndicate. During World War I Spain, as a neutral country, made a vast amount of money but, generally speaking, the laboring classes did not receive anything like a fair share of the national prosperity. This fact was perhaps the deciding factor which drove the majority of the working classes out of moderate labor organizations into the arms of the revolutionary leaders in the extremist labor groups. However, the more moderate and level-headed labor leaders didn't give up the fight against the radical groups, and as a result of their efforts, they brought into being a new labor group known as the Free Syndicate, in 1920. During the next 3 years there was continuous strife going on between the right and left labor organizations. Local strikes, general strikes, destruction of property, private assassinations to remove labor leaders, wholesale murders to reduce the strength of opposing organizations. All these crimes were committed in the name of liberty. By 1923 conditions became chaotic. To prevent the Communist Party bringing about another revolution, the King of Spain asked General Franco to become military dictator. One of the first results of Primo de Rivera's dictatorship was the successful termination of the Moroccan War. It was during the final stages of this war that General France greatly distinguished himself in the field. He turned what looked like a complete military defeat into a brilliant victory. By tempering justice with mercy he won the admiration, and the loyalty, of many of the Moroccan natives. It was thus he came to the notice of the general public in Spain. Rivera is accused by his enemies of doing everything a man shouldn't do. It is only fair to record that he did restore law and order, he brought about a number of social reforms, he cooperated with Largo Caballero to improve working conditions. He worked so hard that only his breakdown in health in 1929 can explain the errors in judgment he made during 1930. Tired and worn out, and as if in a hurry to unburden himself of the responsibilities of office, he called in two socialist leaders, Bastero and Saborit. He charged them with the task of reorganizing the electoral machinery of the nation so the people could decide whether they wanted a monarchy or a republican government. Just why de Rivera appointed Bastero and Saborit to reorganize the electoral machine of Spain will probably never be known. The two socialists rigged the election machinery so well a socialist republican government was assured. In Madrid alone the number of fictitious voters exceeded 40,000. 6. Similar corruption existed in all the larger centers of population. To ensure the end of the monarchy in Spain, the Grand Orient Lodges organized a special, military brotherly union, by which they obtained the promise of 21 of the 23 Spanish generals to support the republican cause. General Mola, who was chief of the Spanish internal security, in his book, Tempestad Calma Intriga y Crisis informs us that the generals were initiated into the Grand Orient and had 1.5 million pesetas placed to their credit, to help them escape abroad should the republican movement fail. Franco was one of the two generals who refused to join the military brotherly union. In support of Mola's statement, Cano López sang on the floor of the Spanish Cortes Parliament, since 1925. Masonry has grouped under the heading, Military Brotherly Union, most of the high-ranking officials of the army. The members include Cabanellas, Sanjurjo, Gaudad, Mola, López, Ochoa, Queipo de Lana, and others. Of 23 divisional generals, 21 were Masons. All had taken the oath of the Grand Orient. I swear obedience without limitation to the head of the Council of 33. I swear to acknowledge no mortal is above him. Lopez added, both in 1929, for the abolition of the dictatorship of de Rivera, and in 1931 for the abolition of the monarchy, the Grand Orient issued the orders most of the other generals obeyed. 7. General Mola tells how he, and most of the other generals, broke their oath to the Grand Orient when they became convinced that they were being used to further the secret plans of Stalin to turn Spain into another communist dictatorship. 8. The international bankers helped finance the revolutionary effort in Spain without becoming involved themselves. In February 1932, Le Journal reports that Stalin promised $200,000 to help finance the revolutionary training schools in Spain. The financial statements submitted to the 1931 Congress of the Communist International discloses the fact that £240,000 English money had been received to help the Spanish revolutionaries. 9. In addition to the above, 2.5 million pesetas were made available for the purchase of arms and ammunition. General Mola says that by 1938 over 200 revolutionary leaders had arrived in Spain after being trained in the Lenin Institute in Moscow. From 1930 to the date of the election, a campaign of infamy was carried on against the King of Spain and the royal family exactly as it was against Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. One of the most ridiculous lies ever invented claimed that one Spanish soldier was bled to death every day to keep the Prince of Asturias alive. He was known to be suffering from hemophilia. Other slanders accused the king of being a libertine, just as the Empress of Russia had falsely been accused of being mistress to Rasputin. The plugged ballots in the large industrial centers wiped out the strong rural vote in favor of the monarchy. After the election had been declared to favor a republican form of government, King Alfonso XIII of Spain issued his last public proclamation. It read as follows: "The elections held on Sunday proved to me that I no longer hold the love and affection of my people. My conscience tells me this condition will not be permanent because I have always striven to serve Spain, and my people, with all my devotion. A king may make mistakes. Without doubt I have done so on occasion, but I know our country has always shown herself generous towards the faults of others committed without malice. I am the king of all Spaniards, and I am a Spaniard. I could find ample means to maintain my royal prerogatives in effective resistance to those who assail them, but I prefer to stand resolutely aside rather than to provoke a conflict which might array my countrymen against one another in civil war and patricidal strife. I renounce no single one of my rights which, rather than being mine, are an accumulated legacy of history for the guardianship of which I shall one day have to render strict account. I shall wait the true and full expression of the collective conscience and, until the nation speaks, I deliberately suspend the exercise of my royal powers and am leaving Spain, thus acknowledging that she is sole mistress of her destinies. Also now I believe that I am fulfilling the duty which the love of my country dictates. I pray God that all other Spaniards may feel and fulfill their duty as sincerely as I do." 10. Many of the socialists who formed the Spanish Republican government in 1931 were sincere in their beliefs. They wanted no part of red communism or black Nazism. But they were proved to be powerless to prevent the communists and anarchists from putting the second part of their revolutionary program into effect. The tactics the revolutionary leaders employed were to double-cross the socialists at every opportunity. Red cells within the government caused the government to commit some foolish mistakes. The Reds outside then damned the government as a lot of incompetent, corrupt, and inefficient nincompoops. The communists and anarchists claimed only a dictatorship of the proletariat could establish a stable government. The agents of Moscow committed every conceivable kind of crime to bring those responsible for internal security into disrepute also. General de Rivera had used Largo Caballero a great deal to iron out differences between labor and employers during the years he had been dictator. With the advent of the Republican movement, Largo Caballero showed his true colors. By 1935, Caballero openly boasted that he had placed tens of thousands of communist cells throughout Spain. At the 11th plenum of the executive of the Communist International, the Spanish delegates were showered with congratulations because the prerequisites of a revolutionary crisis are being created at a rapid rate in Spain. 11. At the 12th plenum, the wording of the congratulations to the Spanish delegates was as follows: "In Spain, in particular, we have been able to observe such revolutionary strike struggles going on uninterruptedly over a period of many months as the Spanish proletariat has never experienced before. What is happening in these struggles is, above all, the further development of a Spanish revolution. There is an old saying, when thieves disagree the truth will come out. That is exactly what happened in Spain. The three leaders of Moscow's underground in Spain were Joaquin Morin, Victor Serges, and Andres Nin. They were all young men. They had all received special training in revolutionary activities in the Lenin Institute in Moscow before being entrusted with the leadership in Spain. Morin had been mixed up in the separatist movement in Catalonia since he was 16 years of age. At the mature age of 17, this intellectual thinker had set out to teach the Spanish people the Soviet solution of the world's economic troubles. At the age of 21, he was elected head of the anarchists. He preached and practiced the religion of hate and violence. In 1914, he was condemned to 20 years imprisonment, but he was not of legal age for such a penalty. Morin was a delegate to the Third Congress of the Communist International held in Moscow, 1921. He attracted favorable attention. With the fall of Primo de Rivera, Morin returned to Spain. He had been hiding out in France and Moscow. He had lived a hectic life. He had been in and out of jail, had escaped from prison, been wounded in 1925, confined in Citadel Montjuic, etc., etc. It is said the only period of peace he enjoyed in his life was the 3 years he and his young wife spent in Paris, 1927-30. Morin wrote a book in 1936. Victor Serges wrote the preface to it. In this book Hacia la Segunda Revolución, he exposed the fact that Stalin had departed from the Marxian ideology and charged he was using the forces of communism to forward his own secret totalitarian imperialistic ambitions. 12. Even after Morin, Serges, and Nin broke openly with Stalin in 1936, their power and influence amongst the working classes was so great that Stalin ordered that they should be allowed to live until they had served their purpose. Stalin used them right up to the beginning of the civil war in Spain. Then he ordered them liquidated. He directed that their deaths shall be accomplished in such a manner as to make it appear to the public that all three had died as martyrs to the communist cause. Morin was betrayed to Franco's forces and after trial was executed. Serges is reported to have been shot by loyalists while fighting, and Nin was also disposed of. Their deaths were loudly attributed to acts of violence by the enemies of communism. Victor Serges wrote, "The evolution of Soviet communism was completed in 1936. From revolutionary internationalism to a nationalism of great military power served, in various countries, by parties which it subsidized. After July 1936, the Stalinites formed the Unified Socialist Party affiliated with the Third International, and the object of Stalinism is to establish the new power of a fascist nature to encircle France, the probable ally of Russia, in the war that is being prepared." Then again Morin says, "The traditional policy of England is to ruin its adversaries, so as then to pose as the protector and to render impossible the renaissance of the conquered vassal. Spain is primarily the victim of England and, next in order, of France. When Spain hesitates, England and France attacks her strongly. If she inclines towards England, France increases the persecution. So long as France and England are capitalistic countries, they will not have to be the natural ally to Spain." 13. The logical line would be the curve through Portugal, Germany, Italy and Russia. A block of this nature would neutralize France and England. 14. Serges explained how so much loyalist propaganda found its way into the universal press, while so little space was given to Franco's releases. Serges wrote, "Never has there been brought into play, the one against the other, such low and demoralizing methods as those used by Stalin and his instrument, the Third International, in a continuous stream of propaganda at long range and without heed for the truth. The method of repetition and cynicism have become almost mechanical. The Soviet bureaucracy is plotting this procedure on an international scale. Every infamy given out by a correspondent of Izvestia at Valentia is at once taken up in a chorus by the special papers in Paris, Stockholm, Oslo, Brussels, London, New York, Melbourne and Buenos Aires. Millions of copies of infamous lies are circulated, they are the only information millions of Soviet workers receive. English, American, Chinese, and New Zealand papers reproduce these lies by order. Advanced intellectuals, who think they are anti-fascist, will appear to believe them. One sees that a formidable enterprise of demoralization is functioning in the universe, and I find pitilessly just, the words of Trotsky, that the Stalinite Comintern propaganda is a syphilis of the workers' movement. 15. What Morin and Serges wrote in 1336 only confirms what Pope Pius XI said in his encyclical, Divini Redemptoris, issued in March 1937. One chapter of this famous document reads, "There is another explanation for the rapid diffusion of communistic ideas. A propaganda truly diabolical that the world has perhaps never witnessed its like before. It is directed from one common center, it is shrewdly adapted to the various conditions of diverse peoples, it has at its disposal vast financial resources, innumerable organizations, international congresses, and countless trained workers, it makes use of newspapers, and pamphlets, cinema, theater, radio, and schools and even universities. Little by little it penetrates into the minds of all classes of the people. Another powerful factor is the suppression and silence on the part of a large section of the press of the world. We say suppression because it is impossible otherwise to explain how a press, usually so eager to exploit even the little daily incidents of life, has been able to remain silent for so long about the horrors perpetrated in Russia, in Mexico, and even in a great part of Spain, and that it should have so little to say concerning a world organization as vast as Russian communism. The silence is due in part to short-sighted political policy and is favored by various occult forces which for a long time have been working for the overthrow of the Christian social order. The sorry effects of this propaganda is before our eyes. Communism has striven, as its champions openly boast, to destroy Christian civilization and the Christian religion by banishing every remembrance of them from the hearts of men, especially of the young. In Spain, as far as possible, every church and monastery was destroyed and every vestige of the Christian religion eradicated. The theory has not confined itself to the indiscriminate slaughter of bishops, and thousands of priests and religious of both sexes, it searches out above all those who have been devoting their lives to the working classes and the poor. The majority of victims have been laymen of all conditions and classes, with a hatred and a savage barbarity one would not have believed possible in our age. No man of good sense, nor statesman conscious of his responsibility, can fail to shudder at the thought that what is happening today in Spain may be repeated tomorrow in other civilized countries. For man some restraint is necessary, as an individual or in society. But tear the idea of God from the hearts of men, and they are urged by their passions to commit the most atrocious barbarities. We will proceed to review the conditions in Spain to which Pope Pius XI tried to draw the attention of the Christian world early in 1937, and failed. 1. This refers to the advice sent by the Sanhedrin in Constantinople to Chemer, Rabbi of Arles in Provence in 1489 mentioned previously. 2. For further particulars see Bakunin by Professor E.H. Carr. 3. For details regarding this period of Spanish history read La Quiebra Fraudulenta de la República by C. Domi. 4. This is a typical example of how any situation is used to divide the citizens of a nation and get them fighting each other on the principle that all wars pave the way for revolution. 5. This is a typical example of how the agents of the international bankers are placed in private and responsible enterprise for the purpose of helping their revolutionary leaders to oust moderate leaders they cannot buy or otherwise control. 6. See the Spanish Arena, p. 56. 7. See Jean Doré L'Herve Latine January, 1937. 8. What General Mola said was confirmed by a broadcast over the radio from Moscow on March 13, 1938. The announcer was explaining why the Civil War wasn't going in favor of the communists' loyalists. He said, "The great work in Spain was seriously compromised by the wicked generals breaking their plighted word to the Grand Orient." 9. Evidence is given elsewhere to prove the revolutionary leaders were supplying counterfeit English bank notes to finance revolutionary efforts in other countries also. 10. This document proves that the international press lied to their readers when it reported the King of Spain had abdicated. The King of Spain never abdicated. Franco holds control of government because the international conspirators are still determined to turn Spain into a totalitarian dictatorship to serve their ends. 11. See English edition of Report of 11th Plenum, page 11, and 12th Plenum, p. 37. 12. Even Morin and Serges failed to suspect that Lenin and Stalin were only carrying out the orders of the international bankers, who in turn obey the Illuminati. 13. Here again is a typical example of how well the international bankers kept their secret. Morin blamed the governments of England and France for the international crimes perpetrated against humanity by the bankers, under the direction of the Illuminati. 14. This confirms what has been previously stated, that once the sphere of influence was established between the 35th and 45th parallel, the countries within the circle would be subjugated. 15. Victor Serges in Morin's Revolution et Contra-Revolution en España.